You probably remember the sinking of the Felicity Ace in 2022. It was a car carrier ship that sank in the Atlantic Ocean with thousands of luxury vehicles on board, including Porsches, Bentleys, Audis, and Lamborghinis worth an estimated $400 million. But the craziest thing is that's not the only story of rare cars sinking to the bottom of the ocean. We found a bunch more instances where rare cars were sunk, lost at sea, and some even sent to the depths intentionally. We've got a lot to get through, so let's grab a Logitech controller and head to the bottom of the sea. Back in 2019, Porsche was delivering the last of their 700 horsepower, twin-turbo 991 GT2 RSs. Even with a price tag of $300,000, these Nürburgring demolishing beasts were in high demand. After production officially ended in February, 4 of the last GT2 RSs and 33 other Porsches set sail for Brazil on a ship called the Grande America. Unfortunately, the ship didn't make it that far. On March 12th, off the coast of France, a truck stored on the second deck of the Grande America began to spark. This started a fire that eventually burned out of control. All 26 crew members were rescued by French authorities, but all the cargo and the ship itself sank to the bottom of the sea. The Grande America went down in 15,000 feet of water, so those cars are now sitting deeper under the Big Blue than the Titanic. A total of 2,100 vehicles were on board, but of course, the biggest losses were those 4 brand new Porsche GT2 RSs. For the owners of those Porsches, getting a full refund wouldn't really be the same as getting one of the last GT2s off the production line, and Porsche recognized that they needed to do more than just give out "next one's on us" vouchers. In May of that same year, Porsche announced it would restart production of the GT2 RS to replace the sunken cars. So I guess those buyers technically got 2 GT2s, it's just that one is in a very hard to reach parking spot. Off the coast of Sudan, there's a sunken ship that is known by divers as the Toyota wreck, as if Toyotas didn't have enough frame rust problems already. In December of 1977, a ship called the Blue Belt was carrying a cargo of 190 Toyotas through waters not normally traveled by cargo ships. It has been speculated that the crew was smuggling these cars through uncharted waters trying to pass by unnoticed. But one of the most noticeable things you can do with a ship is crash it. The theory is that the Blue Belt got caught up on the reef and began to take on water. It's possible the crew tried to dump the cars to stay afloat because today 70s era Toyotas are littered in a trail across the seafloor leading to the ship's final resting place. This is a very popular diving spot because at the highest point, the ship is only 50 feet below sea level. Also, the cars have been taken over by the reef, making it easy to get some cool underwater photos of Nemo and his buddies behind the wheel of a Toyota pickup. Although, if Top Gear taught me anything, it's that pickup still runs.
And it still survived.
On the rarity scale, this one isn't too bad. Plenty of 70s Toyotas are worth buying even today, but this ship was loaded with general purpose vehicles and commuters, not rare sports cars. Although, there are probably a few 40 series Land Cruisers down there serving as some good sea turtle homes now. But not every automotive icon at the bottom of the sea ends up there because of a shipwreck. In fact, sometimes it's cheaper to push them into the ocean than ship them across the world. Before Carroll Shelby and Ford beat Ferrari for the overall win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1966, Shelby had another endurance racer. The Shelby Daytona Coupe was Shelby American's first car designed for endurance racing in the GT class. It was an evolution of the Shelby Cobra, but with refined aerodynamics, including its uniquely chopped rear end. The Daytona had a significantly higher top speed and was more fuel efficient than the Cobra, 2 things that made it perfect for Le Mans. In 1964, while Ford was trying to run their GT40 project solo, Shelby and the Daytona took GT class wins at the 12 Hours of Sebring and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. For the 1965 season, Ford enlisted Shelby to run the GT40 program in order to beat Ferrari in the overall race and the prototype category. This meant that Shelby would be fixing the GT40, running the Daytona program, building and selling the Mustang GT350, and still selling AC Cobras. That is a lot for a Texan chicken farmer. Shelby handed off the Daytona race responsibilities to Alan Mann Racing, based in the UK, leasing them 5 coupes. While Shelby was dealing with Ford's corporate Mann and the Daytona won the GT class at Sebring, Daytona, Monza, the Nürburgring, and clinched the GT class championship by 19 points over Ferrari. While Shelby saw this as proof that they could build a Le Mans winning prototype if they weren't being asked to pull PR stunts like swapping to Ford factory engines right before a race, Henry Ford II saw things differently. He ordered Shelby American to cease all involvement with the GT class and focus entirely on the overall win with the GT40. This left a bitter taste in Shelby's mouth, and it not only meant letting go of any staff working on the Daytona, but also those 5 race cars that were still in the UK had no funding to bring them home. When Alan Mann asked what he should do with the cars, Shelby bitterly told him to push them into the North Sea. Mann knew that this would have been an absolute crime against the car community. So instead of doing as Shelby had ordered, Mann rescued the Daytonas and shipped them back to California at his own expense. Shelby wasn't happy with what Mann had done, but I think we're all glad today that those classic race winners were spared a watery grave. I'm sure Alan Mann thought about keeping 1 or 2 of the Daytonas, but as he didn't actually own the cars, it's not like he could show up to the 1966 season opener in a Shelby Schmaytona. Now I know this is about cars that actually ended up at the bottom of the ocean, so let's take a look at a different ultra-rare mid-century American V8 coupe that is still down there today. In 1954, Chrysler started on plans for a 4-seater, 2-door concept called the Chrysler Norseman. The stylist at Chrysler designed a long, sleek body with a cantilever-style roof, but the car would actually be constructed in Italy by a third-party coach builder. The Norseman spent 2 years in design and was set to be the centerpiece of Chrysler's auto show presence as the idea car that would influence the future of their lineup. They were not just building a rolling shell. This was a fully functional show car that had a 5.4-liter Hemi V8, push-button automatic transmission, and a full aluminum body. With no A or B pillars, the driver would have an unobstructed view of the road ahead. If only the same could be said for the ship's navigator. The Italian manufacturer finished construction of the Norseman in 1956 and loaded the $150,000 one-off onto the SS Andrea Doria. The 5-year-old Italian ocean liner crossed the Atlantic without incident, but once it reached the waters around Nantucket Island, a Gulf Stream fog rolled in. Relying on radar and a get out of the way whistle, Andrea Doria continued through what should have been empty waters. But another ocean liner called the Stockholm had changed course in order to save a bit of time and plowed right into the broadside of the Andrea Doria. A total of 51 lives were lost. And while the Stockholm was able to make it back to port, the Doria had almost capsized from the impact and eventually sank with all its cargo. Today, the Andrea Doria sits on its side nearly 300 feet below sea level. Over a dozen divers have died trying to recover treasures from the first-class cabins, but the Norseman itself will forever remain in the murky depths. Only a few photos of the completed car exist, and the Chrysler employees who spent years designing it would never get to see the fruits of their labor. The sinking of the Andrea Doria is mainly blamed on poor communication between the two ships and the limitations of radar technology at the time. So if we fast forward 50 years, we should expect the situation to go much differently, right? The MV Tricolor was a Norwegian vehicle carrier famous for having 3 collisions in the English Channel in the span of 2 weeks. The first incident occurred in 2002 outside Dunkirk Harbor when the Tricolor, loaded down with nearly 3,000 BMWs, Volvos, and Saabs, totaling nearly $50 million in value, collided with a container ship called the Kariba. Just like last time, the Kariba managed to stay afloat, but the Tricolor listed to its side and sank into the mud of the 100-foot deep waterway. The problem was that with the sea being so shallow here and the port of Dunkirk being one of France's busiest, it wasn't long before another ship clipped the side of the stricken Tricolor. Eventually, French and British military ships were stationed around the wreckage to prevent further collisions. But despite 3 guard ships, lighted buoys, and direct radio messages, a Turkish fuel carrier still managed to get beached on the wreck before the rising tide eventually freed them. 1 ship, 3 crashes, 3 100,000 cars. The tricolor is no longer there. A salvage company eventually used a carbide-encrusted cable to saw the ship into 9 sections. While the cars that were on board didn't actually stay at the bottom of the sea, it's wild to see some of these cross-sections of the ship with cars inside like a giant beef Wellington. Actually, it's in France, so a giant Chateaubriand. But not all of these ships sank by accident. Some, like the SS Thistlegorm, were sunk by enemy fire. In 1941, German Luftwaffe were dispatched from Crete to hunt down a British troop carrier in the Red Sea. They never found what they were looking for, but not wanting to return empty-handed, or rather full-handed without having dropped their payload, the pilots dropped 2 2.5-ton bombs onto the SS Thistlegorm, which was moored off the coast of Egypt. The Thistlegorm was part of a convoy making its way north from Cape Town, South Africa, and it was loaded down with pre-war vehicles, including military vehicles like Bedford trucks and Norton motorcycles. Like the Toyota wreck, the Thistlegorm has become a popular diving site as the deepest point is only 100 feet below sea level. But being as old as it is, this wreck is rapidly deteriorating as the salty seawater rusts away this wartime landmark. Ocean mark. We're coming up on one of the most interesting wrecks, the Felicity Ace, but before we get to that, I want to quickly talk about another ace, the Cougar Ace. It never sank exactly, but it still fits into the world of weird maritime car stories. In July of 2006, the Cougar Ace was transporting nearly 5,000 Mazda vehicles from Japan to Vancouver, British Columbia, and Tacoma, Washington. Due to large waves and a poorly executed ballast transfer, the ship began to list, finally coming to rest at a crazy 60-degree angle. All 23 crew members were rescued, but the ship never sank. Instead, it floated, partially capsized for over a month. Eventually, a salvage company was able to tow the ship to Portland. Once the ship had been righted and the cargo recovered, Mazda stated there was surprisingly minimal damage to the vehicles on board, which included brand new RX-8s, Miatas, and 5 Mazda Speed 6s. To be on the safe side though, Mazda USA decided that all of these vehicles would be crushed for liability reasons. But if you've got a gray market NC Miata that seems unusually at home on high bankings, I think we've just found out why. And now we come to the Felicity Ace, the ship that dominated the news cycle for weeks in early 2022. This cargo ship's sole purpose was to safely transport cars across the sea, and it could carry over 4,000 at a time. On her final voyage, Old Felicity was loaded down with an estimated $400 million worth of cargo. The manifest included 1,100 Porsches, 561 VWs, 2,000 Audis, including nearly 100 e-trons, and 85 Lamborghinis. This included 15 of the last V12 powered Aventadors, the LP784 Ultimate, which has an MSRP of over $600,000. Bentley also lost quite a few vehicles, including over 80 Bentley Continental GTs, so there are definitely some W12s down there as well. On February 16, 2022, a fire began in the cargo section of the ship about 200 miles off the coast of the Azores. It was reported that the fire was started by the lithium-ion batteries in one of the electric cars, as if EVs weren't already a hard sell for car enthusiasts. Due to the nature of the fire, it was incredibly hard to extinguish, and for nearly a week, the Felicity Ace drifted in the Atlantic as salvage teams tried their best to keep the blaze contained. It wasn't until March 1st, 2 weeks from the start of the fire, that the ship eventually capsized and sank in rough seas. The Portuguese Navy oversaw the final moments of the Felicity Ace as it descended into 10,000-foot deep water. And the saddest part is that the Ace wasn't just loaded down with rich guy cars. There were some great used cars on board being imported by true car enthusiasts as well. A 1996 Honda Prelude SIR, one of the first 100 made, was on its way to America to undergo a full restoration. A variation on the 1977 Land Rover Defender called the Santana was also on board, as well as a 2007 BMW 750i. Even Matt Farah had a modified Porsche Boxster on board. It's crazy to think about how many amazing cars have ended up at the bottom of the sea and how often this kind of incident happens. If you want to see some of our articles covering the journey of the Felicity Ace from when this was happening in 2022, you can check out the links in the description below. We've also written about several of these other shipwrecks in the past, and you can find it all at thedrive.com. That's all for me. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.